So what exactly is going on with Nvidia? This is the worst GPU launch that we've ever seen. Barely any information. Is the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte even a real card? I mean, I made a joke when Hardware Unboxed tweeted that they had to buy one because nobody was supplying review samples, and a lot of people it was pretty funny because it's like I said it was a collector's item, even though nobody kind of really wants it. It is a collector's item. I haven't seen anything anywhere. Like even my local micro center, which always has the latest GPUs and they always have a bunch of different varieties. I look online, it's nowhere to be seen. You can find the regular 4060 Ti 8 gigabyte, but this one, nowhere to be seen, the 16 gigabyte. I mean, it's not a terrible GPU in terms of what it's giving us until you look at the price, $499. No, thank you. This shouldn't even be $399. This should probably be like $329. And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows 10 Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. It's a $329 GPU that maybe should have been this guy. Look at this. This is a 4060, and I was one of the few people that actually bought a 4060, at least initially. When I went to my micro center, they hadn't sold any. I was like the first or second person at like 11 a.m. to buy it when it came out. That's because I need to test it. I need to know if it's really good, really bad for the price. I have to give you guys my opinion on it, so I have to, test the GPU. The 4060 Ti 16 gigabytes at $499 represents a really bad value. There was something that came out recently that MSI was testing it against the 8 gigabyte version, and it was actually slower in some cases. Now, I don't think that's true. I think their testing methodology might have been a little bit off, but Hardware Unboxed did test it out against the regular 8 gigabyte 4060 Ti, and yes, there are many scenarios, it seems, that as we predicted, the 16 gigabytes of VRAM definitely makes a difference, especially when you start to have, maybe higher resolutions, you start to load those textures. Definitely in many games, like side by side, there's sometimes when you're getting like FPS of 90 on the 16 gigabyte one, and then the 8 gigabyte is literally collapsing on itself with stutters and getting like 8 frames per second because the VRAM buffer has filled up. So when it reached that limit, and nowadays games are using a lot of VRAM, most of them do seem to go around at least that 10 gigabyte limit if you really let them, maybe 13 where they at least allocate that much. It's certainly making a really big difference. You can see even in the test that they did, if it's a VRAM limited situation, the 16 gigabyte one definitely is going to be better. You just have more space there to really play with. The question here is it a GPU where you're going to be encountering these scenarios, as often? It's really meant to be a 1080p GPU where it's going to be a little less likely you really run into these type of bottlenecks. Aside from these more VRAM limited situations, where it's not every single game, in general, the GPU is not really that much faster than the cheaper 8 gigabyte version. It doesn't really make the 8 gigabyte version look better by any means just because it's cheaper. Because if I was buying that GPU as like my main GPU, I would be concerned at seeing some of the really bad performance when that VRAM buffer is filled up compared to the 16 gigabyte one. I just wouldn't be able to really get over that fact. And even though $100 extra is a huge ripoff for only 8 gigabytes of VRAM, I mean, it's a difference between unplayable and actually a smooth experience. So it's very unfair Nvidia is actually doing this. So I don't know why they're not sending out review samples, why we barely see them for sale. Maybe they saw the sales of like the 4060 and the 4060 Ti were absolutely terrible. So they figured they may as well just trickle it down into, stores and things like that over time. So that way they don't have a bunch sitting on shelves. They have a lot of regular GPUs, RTX 4000, that have come out on the shelves already. Not only RTX 3000, which some places still have inventory from all those years of like building up, 4000 like 4060, 4060 Ti 8 gigabyte, even 4070s, pretty easy to find anywhere that you go. So it's definitely not a GPU that I think you should buy. The 16 gigabytes of VRAM is certainly appealing in an environment where VRAM is important, but for $499, there are much cheaper options which will get you more VRAM and better performance. Like you have to look to AMD, maybe the 6800 with 16 gigabytes of VRAM. You can probably find that in the $400 range. I mean, the 6700 XT was pretty widely recommended in terms of having the 12 gigabytes of VRAM and being considerably cheaper than the 4060 Ti and closer to a 4060, and having rasterization that's good. Now, of course, the 4060 Ti has its benefits, much better power consumption than most GPUs in its class. Definitely with the 4060, they're very efficient. They do have DLSS 3 when you can utilize that, but not every single scenario. And then, of course, the NVIDIA specific features. But aside from that, we really have to, stretch it further to make this a GPU that you want to buy. It really should have been like $329, the price of the 3060. That's the type of performance that would have made this pretty, an incredible card for $329 with 16 gigabytes of VRAM. But at $499, I mean, that's what a 3070 costs, and that was like a different level than this, surely, even with 8 gigabytes of VRAM. It just performed better for its generation. Now, what's going to happen next? I think now NVIDIA is going to draw this generation out. We're not going to see RTX 5000 maybe for a little bit longer than normal. Why would they release a new generation where they can barely sell RTX 4000? Sort of the buying sentiment is at an all-time low, and they just don't have an incentive to go after that. And of course, the only thing we can really watch out for is if AMD or Intel are going to respond with GPUs with better VRAM, much better pricing. The secret's going to be pricing. It's not that people aren't buying GPUs because, they don't want to buy GPUs. Prices are way too high, and Nvidia really, I don't know how many times I can say really, but they really limited the hardware this generation, banking on DLSS and AI and software to really make up for a lot of that. And gamers just aren't really ready for that yet. In the future, it may be true that the AI side is so good that you're not going to need nearly as powerful hardware. That's usually how technology goes, sure. But now is not the time yet, unless these are just the teething pain years, really, where when the change comes, we'll look back and be like, all right, we had to go through some terrible adjustments. But I don't really think that's the case entirely here, because NVIDIA really raised these prices a lot more than we would expect them to. Let's see what happens with the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte. I don't think it's going to be very popular at all. Maybe we'll start to see discounts on it. Remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.